The phone rings at 2:47 a.m. You're awake before the second ring. You don't keep it on silent. You don't ever keep it on silent. The voice on the other end is calm. Too calm. That tells you everything you need to know. People only sound this calm when something is very, very wrong. An address. Floor 47. Suite C. No name needed. The line goes dead. You get dressed. Black slacks. White shirt. No tie. You don't drive yourself. The car is already waiting downstairs. It always is. You ride the private elevator up to the suite. The hallway is empty. Hotel security is gone. Someone made sure of that before you got there. You knock twice. The door opens before your knuckle leaves the wood. A man in his early 20s stands in front of you. Tuxedo jacket. No shirt underneath. His hands are shaking. There's blood on his sleeve. Not a lot. Just enough. You step inside. You don't say his name. You never say their names out loud. You already know who he is. You know who his father is. You know what the family is worth. 42 billion last quarter. You read the report on the way over. You walk past him into the bedroom. There is a girl on the floor. You take a long breath. Then you get to work. This is the part of the night where most people would call the police. Most people would scream. Most people would panic. You are not most people. You are a fixer. Let's go back and see how you got here. You used to be a lawyer. Top of your class. White shoe firm in Manhattan. 6 figures at 26. You worked 80-hour weeks defending hedge fund executives from SEC investigations, and you were good at it. Better than good. You had a talent for finding the one detail everyone else missed. The phone log nobody pulled. The email nobody flagged. The witness whose story didn't quite line up. A senior partner noticed. He pulled you aside one Friday evening after a long deposition. He told you most lawyers spend their careers fighting over what already happened. The good ones make sure nothing happens at all. He slid a phone number across the table. Said to call it if you ever wanted a different kind of work. The kind of work where the case never reaches a courtroom because there is no case. You called the number 2 months later. Your first client was a tech billionaire, 44 years old, married, a pattern of 19-year-olds. One of them had a notebook, the kind of notebook that ends careers and marriages and stock prices. You didn't break in. You didn't threaten anyone. You sat across from her in a coffee shop in Brooklyn and you talked. You listened. You found out what she actually wanted, which was never the public scandal. It was a tuition payment, a green card for her brother, a feeling of being seen by someone who wasn't trying to sleep with her. You gave her 2 of those things. The notebook went into a fireplace. The story never ran. Your fee was $250,000. The whole thing took 11 days. You got a second call within a week. You realized something on that second job. The world is full of problems. The world is also full of money. Most of those problems are caused by people with too much of that money. And almost none of them require violence to solve. They require attention. They require a person who can sit in a room with anyone and figure out what they actually want. That person, it turned out, was you. You stopped practicing law. The work was eating your hours and you were earning 10 times your firm salary on the side. You handed in your resignation. The senior partner smiled when you did. He'd been waiting for it. Your first solo year you cleared $4 million. You bought an apartment. You bought a car. You stopped flying commercial. You stopped going to firm parties. You stopped going to most parties. You couldn't be photographed with the people you worked for, which meant you couldn't be photographed at all. Your client list grew. A pharmaceutical heiress whose son ran over a cyclist on the highway. A media mogul whose in turn had a recording. A senator's brother who owed money to a man who didn't take losses well. A real estate dynasty whose patriarch had been cooking books for a decade and was about to die before he could clean them up. Each job was the same shape. Find the leverage. Find the want. Find the trade. You almost never used money first. You used proximity. You used understanding. You used the simple fact that the person with the leverage was always lonelier than they pretended to be. You sat with them. You let them talk. You found the version of the story where everyone walked away with what they actually needed. Your fees climbed. $500,000 a job. Then $1 million. Then $2 million for the harder ones. The ones with bodies. The ones with paper trails that needed to disappear without a trace. You hired a small team. A forensic accountant who used to work for the Treasury. A former intelligence officer who ran your background checks. A publicist who knew how to plant a story in 3 outlets in under an hour. None of them knew the full picture. You kept it that way. 5 years in, you were on speed dial for 16 of the richest families in the country. Old money, new money, oil money, tech money, hedge fund money, dynasty money. You didn't advertise. You didn't have a website. Your name didn't appear on a single registry. You were a phone number passed between people who never wrote it down. You moved into a penthouse on the Upper East Side. You stopped going outside without a reason. You ordered groceries. You ate dinner at restaurants that closed their kitchens for you and turned the lights down so no one could see who was at the back table. You were 35 years old and you were one of the most quietly powerful people in New York City. You were also alone. You hadn't noticed at first. The work was too consuming. Phone calls at all hours. Travel on a moment's notice. A jet on standby because 3 of your clients owned jets and one of them was usually willing to send theirs. You told yourself you'd build the personal life later. Once the business stabilized. Once you hit a certain number. You hit the number. You set a new one. You hadn't been on a date in 2 years. You hadn't been to a wedding that wasn't a client's. You hadn't seen your sister in 3 years and you'd missed your nephew's birth. But the apartment was beautiful. The view was extraordinary. The wine was the kind that made other people quiet when they tasted it. You had everything. You told yourself you had everything. Then it happened. A new client called. A hedge fund founder. 48 years old. Worth $9 billion. His daughter was 21. There was a video. There was a man in the video who was not her boyfriend. The man in the video was a sitting member of the cabinet. You took the meeting. You always took the meeting. He told you the story in his office. His voice was steady. His hands were not. He wanted the video gone. He wanted the man in the video to never speak about it. He wanted his daughter's name kept out of every conversation. You told him your fee. He didn't blink. You worked the job for 6 weeks. It was harder than most. The cabinet member had his own people. The video had been copied. There were 3 people who knew the file existed and one of them was a journalist at a paper you couldn't lean on. You handled the journalist with proximity. You handled the cabinet member with leverage. You handled the daughter with a long conversation in a hotel suite where you let her cry for an hour before you said a single word. You closed the job. You collected your fee. $5 million wired in 3 pieces to 3 accounts in 3 jurisdictions. 3 weeks later, the journalist's body was found in a parking garage in D.C. You hadn't ordered that. You hadn't suggested it. You hadn't even hinted at it. But you'd handed your client a clean file with the journalist's full name and address on the cover page, and you knew, sitting in your apartment watching the news at 11 p.m., that he had taken it from there. You didn't sleep that night. You sat on your balcony and watched the city. You told yourself you weren't responsible. You told yourself the man would have died one way or another. You told yourself a lot of things. The next morning, the hedge fund founder called. He didn't mention the journalist. He thanked you for the work. He said he had another job for you. You took the meeting. The next 2 years, the work didn't change. The work was the same. But something inside you had changed and it never changed back. You started keeping a list. You kept it in your head. You never wrote it down. The list was the names of people who had died after you closed jobs. The journalist. A bookkeeper in Connecticut. A girlfriend in Miami. A 19-year-old fashion model who had been planning to give an interview to a podcast. You hadn't ordered any of it. You had handed your clients clean reports. You had told them what to do and what not to do. They had done what they wanted anyway. You told yourself you would be more careful. You started leaving names off reports. You started giving your clients less. You started lying to them just a little, just enough. They noticed. They didn't say anything at first. The fees kept arriving. The calls kept coming. But you started picking up small signals. A client who used to call himself would have his assistant call instead. A meeting that used to happen at his office would happen at a restaurant. A wire that used to clear in 2 hours would take a week. Then one of your clients invited you to dinner. He was 61, third-generation oil money, 14 billion. He had been one of your earliest clients. He liked you. You had always liked him. Dinner was at his estate in Greenwich. Just the two of you. His wife was at a charity gala in the city. The staff served 3 courses and disappeared. He waited until coffee. Then he set down his cup and looked at you for a long moment. He told you he knew about the lying. He told you he had asked around. He told you several of his peers had noticed the same pattern. Reports getting thinner. Names disappearing. Information getting curated. He told you he understood. He told you he wasn't angry. He was just letting you know that you had become a problem that needed to be solved. He took a sip of coffee. He told you he wasn't going to be the one to solve it. He just wanted to give you a heads up, for old time's sake. You drove back to the city alone. You sat in the back of the car and watched the lights, and you understood, for the first time in 15 years, that you had built a life with no exits. You knew too much. You had been the man in too many rooms. You had handled the daughter and the bookkeeper and the journalist and the cabinet member. You had files. You had memories. You had a reputation that depended on never speaking about any of it. The moment your clients stopped trusting you to clean their messes, you became the next mess. You called your team that night, the accountant, the intelligence officer, the publicist. You told them the firm was closing. You wired each of them a year's pay. You told them not to call you again. The next morning, you packed a bag. You had a plan. You had always had a plan. 3 passports. 2 apartments overseas. Accounts in countries that didn't ask questions. You had been ready for this day since your 2nd year in the business. You drove yourself to the airport. You had told no one. The plan only worked if no one knew. Your private hangar at Teterboro. Your jet was fueled. Your pilot had filed a flight plan to Geneva. You walked across the tarmac at 6 a.m. with your bag in one hand. A car was parked on the apron next to your jet. A black SUV, the kind your clients used. The hedge fund founder stepped out of the back. The one with the daughter. The one with the journalist. He was holding a coffee. He was smiling. He told you he'd had a feeling this morning. He told you he'd asked his security team to check a few hangars. He told you he wasn't going to hurt you. That wasn't why he was there. He was there because he had a job for you. He told you the job was complicated. He told you it would take years. He told you he was going to need you full-time, which was fine, because you weren't going to have any other clients anymore. He told you the fee was generous. He told you the apartment in the city was yours. The jet was yours. He was going to take care of you. He told you the alternative was the journalist's parking garage. You stood on the tarmac with your bag in your hand. The jet engines hummed behind you. Geneva was 8 hours away. Nobody there knew your face. He waited. He didn't rush you. He drank his coffee. You set the bag down. That was 4 years ago. You still live in the penthouse. The view is still beautiful. The wine is still the kind that makes people quiet when they taste it. Your old clients are gone. You only have one client now. You handle his calls. You clean his messes. You sit in rooms with people he is afraid of. You find their wants. You make their problems disappear. He pays you. He pays you very well. You are not a fixer anymore. You are a fix. The thing he uses when he needs the world to look the way he wants it to look. He owns you the way he owns the jet and the apartment and the staff and the daughter who never knew about the video and the version of the truth she still believes. You spent 15 years convincing the most powerful people in the world that nothing they did had to have consequences. It turned out one of them was paying attention. You used to clean up other people's lives. Now you are the thing that gets cleaned.